Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Usually in the afternoon, students tend to doze off, so it's fine. If you doze off in this talk, that is totally fine. I'd really like to thank you for coming to this probably really boring academic talk. I hope there's something you can take away from this talk. So let's get started. So the whole concept has something to do with discourse analysis, applied linguistics, academic writing, and authorial stance, of course. And when it comes to stance taking from the teacher side, what are teachers' appeals? Usually, we'll just go ahead and tell the students to assume a stance when you write and defend for your position, because as a teacher, I respect you as an autonomous and independent human being. So that's the teacher's appeal. But from the student side, to them, autonomous is something they probably are not quite sure of, and they probably do not see themselves as an independent human being, because when it comes to learning, they tend to still look up to the teacher as authority. Okay, so there's no autonomous for them. They don't think they are independent, and that results in usually they do not present any stance in their writing. So as novice researchers or writers, I think we should be more mature than that. So in argument, especially research argument, we take a stance and adopt an angle to report our research. I hope this picture can explain itself a little bit to you. We take an angle and we also assume a stance. So it looks like this. We cannot be all-knowing, okay? So we need to kind of show which angle we take and what kind of stance we take to others, because each one of us see things differently. So by taking a certain stance, we also want to anticipate how would the readers react and receive our argument. You don't want this to happen. You don't want to repulse your readers, so they got really agitated. So we need to think about, are we too provocative in presenting our argument and our stance? So for example, by all means, natural resources have been spent. So this might arouse some aversion to the statement. So when you say by all means, it's probably too provocative, too assertive, okay? And are you presenting too strong a stance? You probably need evidence to back yourself up. So for example, when you say something like this, you simply just have to trust me on that, okay? So let's look at the cues, linguistic cues. You simply just have to trust me on that. So this is way too strong, and if you want me to do this, you probably need to give me evidence. So something like, audience, please believe me, I wouldn't lie to you. Yes, but we need evidence. So when it comes to stand taking, it can be quite risky as well, because we need to think about, do we win the readers over or do we lose them? So when we talk about taking a stance, we also negotiate a relationship with the readers for the purpose of convincing the readers. So the purpose for us to write an effective, persuasive research argument is quite clear. We need to convince the readers. So it looks like this. So in the second circle, if the authors are too assertive, they probably leave little room for the reader to counter-argue. Okay, in the cases where the authors are too tentative, okay, the reader probably gain more space or room to counter-argue. So that's kind of the idea. So now we need to consider which voice or stance do we adopt. First of all, assert. So how do we do assertive kind of stance? So take the sentence, for example, like Let's to say extensive corpuses of scholarship have been generated for both fields. So when you do the assertive kind of claim or statement, you want to be sure. You want to be really assertive. You are not like, do I really need to be assertive? Are you asking me or telling me? So there's nothing like somewhat assertive or somewhat confident. You just go ahead and be assertive. And we can do acknowledgement as well, like in this sentence. Lee made a timely observation that media worldwide has suffered from amnesia and apathy. Okay, so in this case, you actually attribute a positive message to the claim, to the statement, because you use timely, okay, to point out that you kind of acknowledge the source. And it's always good to acknowledge. So in research writing, we say that you need to include citations whenever necessary to back you up, to provide evidence. And we can also entertain our statement like this. So one reason why forgiveness attracts attention might be its prosocial character, making a focus of the positive psychology movement. And this one, the religious beliefs of the intrinsically religious people, the religious fundamentalists seem to play a protective role in managing terror of death. So you can see the linguistic cue here to entertain the claim. And you can do counter as well. So in this case, this is something we usually see when the authors want to indicate the niche for your study. Okay, so you say, however, previous research blah, blah, falls short in certain aspect. So like in this sentence, however, the empirical evidence which we review below does not allow for firm conclusions regarding the temporal sequence of forgiveness and psychological adjustment. Okay, and we also do concede, okay, concessive statement as well. So I like to take examples from the concessional speech by John McCain in the 2008 presidential run against Obama. So apparently he lost the battle, and he said that Senator Obama and I have had and argued our differences, and he has prevailed. So you conceded your failure. He has prevailed, but we can concede with dignity. So in the next sentence, he said that no doubt many of those differences remain. So you concede with some dignity. And also in this sentence, he said that it's natural tonight to feel some disappointment, but tomorrow we must move beyond it and work together to get our country moving again. I like this message here because you can see that he conceded, and he also tried to turn the negative message to something positive by saying that, but tomorrow we must move beyond it and work together. Okay, so we can kind of render that into academic version. So it's natural tonight to feel some disappointment in academic writing. To report our research, we can say something like, it's natural that some limitations are found. Okay, so you concede, and then you try to turn something, the negative, into positive. Okay, but tomorrow we must move beyond it. So we try to write something positive. Okay, future research can be informed by blah blah blah, and so expand our understanding. So it's always recommended that you turn negative message to something positive. Okay, so there are a few stances that I talked about. You can do acknowledge, entertain, possibilities, and concede, but remember to turn negative positive message, and you can assert, and then you can counter. Okay, when you do countering, probably you want to point out, highlight the niche of your study. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the theoretical construct of stance, but I don't want to burden you with all those theoretical ideas, so I'll just skip to the two probably most relevant ones. Okay, next page. Okay, so I think this pair is probably quite well known, okay, and probably most widely operationalized in English pedagogy, teaching and learning, okay. So basically, when we talk about hedge, we refer to tentative or concessive messages, statements. When we talk about booster, authors probably use quite definitive or assertive voices, stance. For my research, adopted the appraisal framework, which is based on the systemic functional linguistic approach. So under this framework, there are 3 components. One is attitude. It's easy to kind of confuse attitude with voice and stance. I'll talk about this later. And engagement. And the third one is graduation. Actually, when we talk about stance, it's better that we evaluate all 3 components, okay, in our writing, okay. So attitude refers to appreciation, judgment, and affect. Affect reflects your emotion, okay. And graduation refers to the force with which the writer adjusts his or her evaluation. And engagement is one of the most relevant one. So it deals with authorial voice and stance. So I have more definition regarding engagement. So basically, engagement deals with the interplay of 2 kinds of voices. The first one, as you can see here, the monogloss, and the second one is heterogloss. And monogloss refers to the fact that the authors actually do not recognize alternative voices. So when they present monoglossic statement, that refers to something probably some like firm facts, okay? So when do we as writers present firm facts? Of course, probably in the background, we need to talk about like in which year what happened. That's facts. So that's counted as monogloss, okay? And then heterogloss is where the authors recognize alternative positions and try to argue his or her way forward, okay, in the argument. So basically, the talk, we are only going to focus on engagement. So here are more definitions regarding engagement. So engagement proposes that interpersonal meanings are realized in the interplay of 2 discursive voices, monogloss and heterogloss. In projecting an authoritative stance, writers need to display a fine interplay of assertion and openness. That's what I say, tentativeness, okay? Okay, that's the end, okay? And furthermore, it also deals with how other writers project themselves, incorporate and manage different voices, the sources of voices. Okay, that's basically the idea. And it also investigates the way in which speaker writers present themselves as standing with or standing against, as undecided or as neutral with respect to those other speakers and their value positions. So again, so I highlighted the keywords for you to take a look one more time. So basically, it deals with monogloss and heterogloss, and we need to display a fine balance of assertion and openness. And then basically, when we, as a writer, we do manage different voices, and we show that we stand with or against, or as undecided, or as neutral with respect to those other speakers and their value positions. Good? Okay, so here's the framework of heterogloss. So you can see different values here. So the first one, the upper one, the contract. When you do contract, you can use disclaim or proclaiming devices. So like don't, never, but, however, unfortunately, indeed, certainly, clearly. So these all help you to become more assertive, okay? And you can also expand from the dialogic space, okay, by doing some entertaining or attributing. So in entertaining, you can probably use the following devices like may, might, perhaps, probably, is likely, unless, when, and seem, apparently, okay? And in attribute, you acknowledge or you distance, okay? So, but when we talk about all those values, it's not like we can use them as if they can exist outside of context. So context always matters a lot. So here's a very interesting visual. I'm sorry and my bad usually means the same thing unless you are at a funeral. So the context really matters. So we want to take into account context. So this leads us to the notion of prosody. So what is prosody? So basically it talks about we want to deploy consistent evaluation to strengthen our argument instead of presenting discordant values or contradictory ideas. So here are some definitions. I believe there are two. Okay, so based on Hood, prosodies concern the consistent presentation of values to build up a convincing authorship. And the novice writers often found to fail in having values previously encoded, picked up, and reinforced through the extended text. So I have two examples here for you to take a look at. Okay, so I manipulated the stance keywords and then I show in the same text. Okay, so here are two examples of the same text, but you see different stance keywords. So like in the first example, so while you read along, think about the kind of stance that you feel that you get, okay? So first one, the first sentence here, the entry of women into managerial and professional organizational roles has been accompanied by a great amount of research. And in particular, the issue of women's work-related stress has received great attention. However, the results of the research in this area were simply inconclusive. So a review conducted by Nelson indicated that employed women experience greater stress than both non-employed women and men. So the scholars found the following: non-employed women experience greater stress than employed women, while the scholars found no differences in experienced perceived work stress. Future researchers should not spend time debating the nature of the sex-occupational stress relationship, when the existence of the relationship is now clearly the salient issue. So following this assertion, field research studies aimed specifically at comparing men and women's work-related stress. So what kind of stress, what kind of stance do you get from the linguistic expressions here? First of all, you need to decide, are you convinced? Like in this case, in this example, there are quite a few assertive devices, okay, like the final three clauses. Future research should not spend time. This is relatively strong, okay? And when the existence of the relationship is now clearly, this is rather strong. Following this field research, this is also very strong, okay? So you need to decide whether you are convinced. Let's take a look at the next example so you can compare and contrast. So the same text, okay, the same one, but different linguistic expressions related to stance. So the entry of women into managerial and professional organization roles has been accompanied by a great amount of research. In particular, work-related stress has received some attention. So far, so good. However, the results of the research in this area tended to be inconclusive. Okay, tended to be inconclusive. So here the author point out the niche. Okay, tended to be inconclusive. A review conducted by Nelson indicated that employed women experience greater stress. And the scholar found that non-employee women experience greater stress. While the scholar found no difference, future researchers may be advised not to spend time debating the nature. May be advised when the existence of the relationship is now likely to be the salient issue. It's now likely to be. So following this observation, it seems fewer studies aim specifically at comparing men and women's work-related stress. So which one do you prefer? Do you need to see the first one? No. Okay, so which one do you prefer? The first one is more assertive, especially in the last 3 clauses, and this one is relatively tentative. Okay, so like the however sentence, the result of the research tended to be inconclusive, and the final 3 clauses, future researchers may be advised, and it's now likely, it seems, rather, do you get a feel like the author is not too sure about what, kind of advice he can give and how to move on from there if everything is tentative? Okay, so probably want to be maintain some balance, okay, using those resources. Okay, so here are some exercises for you. Okay, let me demonstrate first. Okay, so the sentence is taken from a paper. Okay, so we need to just take a guess what kind of linguistic device the author actually writes. So for example, in this case, there are 4 options. Because learning to read, so the author actually used the first one. It's strikingly different from other sorts of learning. Okay, so the exercise comes next, not here. Okay, here we just take a guess because there's no way we can alter the author's intention. Okay, so the author decided to say it's strikingly different. Okay, so what kind of stance does this sound like? How does the engagement work here? So by saying it's strikingly different, what kind of options do we have? So the author is trying to proclaim to the readers is strikingly, okay, to bring to their attention strikingly, and to also to emphasize the point to your readers. Okay, good. This is of course open to discussion if you that other options fit as well. That's totally fine. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the same, we can alter the sentence, but we can take a guess, and then we have an exercise next. Okay, so a significant number of people never achieve the effortless literacy of the skilled reader, or may never achieve the effortless literacy of the skilled reader, or tend not to. Okay, significant number of people tend not to achieve the effortless literacy of the skilled reader. So take a guess, what's the original message that the author actually writes? First one, second, third. Okay, actually the author decided to say never. So it's rather assertive when you say never. That means, remember the 3 circles, okay? That means the author does not allow any room for you to counter argue, because it just negate the possibility never, okay? So again, so how does the engagement work? So by saying never, so the author's proclaiming to the readers, and probably I think the second one fits as well, to assert a stance. Okay, so I'm kind of the authority here. You don't have to challenge me, okay, by saying never. Okay, emphasize a point to your reader. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this sentence. Okay, so there are actually other wording that helps to contribute to Yeah, there's a missing to contribute to the strong and assertive stance. So there are other. So we need like different wording to collaborate to achieve this kind of assertive stance. So except for never, significant is kind of strong as well, and effortless is kind of assertive, affirmative as well. So all three words, they collaborate together to send this really assertive message. Okay, not just never. Okay, next one. Quantitative research on whether schools matter has generally supported the notion that the problems of U.S. education lie outside of the schools. Mostly supported the notion, or nothing. So quantitative research on whether schools matter has supported. Okay, so when you say has supported, it's kind of a fact. Okay, so it's like when you are presenting background. Okay, so so the author decided to use generally to describe what kind of stance? To proclaim, to assert, to emphasize, to speculate, to show that he or she is uncertain or indeterminate position, or to offer possible interpretations. Generally supported, or something else. Actually, I think this is better. So to show a tendency of, also to probably to give more of a tentative message than an assertive one. So let's go back to the sentence. If the author decided not to use generally or mostly, okay, so the sentence sounds like a fact. So sometimes we say a factual statement like this one, if there's no generally mostly, can be implicitly authoritative as well. Because when you present something as a fact, that means you allow no room for others to counter-argue. This is a fact, that's it. Okay? So you make the decision which kind of stance do you like to project and to win your readers over. Okay. So next one. Both writing instructors and writing researchers face situations that specializations have not prepared them for, have all faced situations that no doubt face. So by this time you probably get an idea. When you say no doubt, it's quite assertive. Okay, face or have all faced situations. These two sounds quite similar to me in terms of stance. So the author decided to just say face. Okay, so then this kind of make the statement a factual statement. Both writing instructors and writing researchers face situations. So this is a fact. So we need something. So this is more monoglossic than heteroglossic, because the author, by saying this, he or she does not really want to enter into any dialogic relationship with the readers. You just take the fact and move on. Okay, so that's why it's monoglossic. There's no conversation, dialogue going on. Okay, the last one. The only way we can go beyond a given instance of any of these phenomena is to first interpret it, to understand its significance. The only way we can go beyond, okay, or the way we can go beyond. So by saying only again, okay, the author did this on purpose, okay, so trying to proclaim, okay, to assert the only, okay, to emphasize a point to the reader. Okay, so remember, when you say something like this, the end of the word isn't nice. So basically, by saying isn't, disclaim, you negate other possibilities, other alternative interpretations. So people will tend to feel like the comment here is always looking for an argument. Okay, so in writing research argument, this is not something we want to see. And this is also, I'm not sure if I can read it for you. Maybe little Jack Horner became argumentative because he was backed into a corner, leaving him no options. Okay, so we don't want this to happen in writing research arguments. Okay, you want to enter into a dialogic relationship with the readers. You allow them to counter argue with you, so you have this dialogue going on. Okay. So when we talk about stance, because we just introduced prosody, so basically involves layers of textual collaboration, starting at the clause or sentence level, moving up to a few sentences. All of them collaborate together to strike the kind of stance you want to project to the readers. A paragraphs, and they all of them together attain a certain rhetorical moves. So let me give you an example. So for example, in the introduction section, when you write your research paper, there are 3 rhetorical moves proposed by Swells. So the first one is establish a territory. The second one is establish a niche. And the third one is occupy the niche by talking about present your work. So in establish a territory, we start from talking about some generalized background facts and moving down to narrow down to specific points that you want to focus on, you want to highlight. So let's connect this to stance. So in making generalizations, in giving general backgrounds, we usually use more monoglossic statement. To present facts, we need to rely on factual statement to build up our understanding, knowledge about the argument. So this is definitely necessary. And narrowing down to our specific focus, probably we'll use some assertive because we want to highlight our point of view, okay, our point, our idea. And then in the second move, you indicate a gap or you add to what is known. So we can see that in many research papers, arguments, they indicate a gap explicitly by saying, however, nevertheless, so that's kind of assertive. Okay, so that can bring the readers to the important point that you want to highlight. And in the third move, you announce the present research descriptively or purposively. So here, we expect to see less argument but more factual statement because you talk about what you are going to do. So we tend not to argue in this move, so more factual statement here. So let's combine this framework with the stance framework, and we have 2 exercises, okay, for you. So you all have the text with you, okay, 2 different texts, and very different discursive strategies are being used and attained here. So the first one, it's a move 1, where the author established the territory, the background of the study, okay? And you can see here there are quite a few entertaining resources, okay? So I'll give you 2 minutes to go over, and then we'll talk about the resources being used here. So as you can see here, so this is actually the second paragraph. So in the second, so we just talk about when you present background, usually we expect to see more factual statement. So we expect to see factual statement probably in the first paragraph where the author talks about the general background, but in the second paragraph still establishing the territory move, the author started to use quite a few entertaining resources. So we need to think about why do we do something like this? Can we just be really blunt and really straightforward in talking about the appeal, our appeal, instead of just entertaining those possibilities? So what's the purpose of doing this? Is it effective to you? So here the authors talk about teachers are facing difficult tasks of providing optimal learning environment. Okay, so from their side, minority students may have different experiences. Okay, for instance, they may have difficulty in understanding. Okay, so no doubt task aspects, but also relational and cultural aspect of the classroom environment come into play. For example, okay, negative teacher stereotypes of minority students may become self-fulfilling. Okay, furthermore, repeated experience of school failure may threaten the self-esteem. Some minority students may lack social cultural skills to participate. Others may actively oppose or resist. Very interesting. So continual, okay, deployment of those entertaining resources. So how does the stance set up the first move? So what kind of first move do you feel after reading all those tentative devices? What kind of impression that you get? So the entertaining devices, okay, are used to build up multiple challenges, as you can see. Okay, so the author talk about multiple challenges needed to be acknowledged and addressed related to the minority students in multicultural classrooms. Okay, so let's go back. It's also a very effective way to present different studies. Okay, so you let the readers know that, well, these have been proposed, okay, in past studies, research. So as an author, I actually have a thorough understanding of this topic. Okay, so this is something we can do. Okay, and also by doing this, you present the multiple challenges. I think this is really effective. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so this is a move 2. So start from the third paragraph where the author establishes the niche of the study. So 2 minutes to take a look. Yeah, so how do you feel about this example? It's very different from the previous one. Okay, I feel the author is quite argumentative, and but I actually have to reread this a few times because I think it's really difficult to understand what the author is trying to appeal to. Okay, and besides being so argumentative. Okay, so let's take a look together. So this is the second move. Yes. So as with the teaching of L2 writers and teaching of digital writing separately, the cross-disciplinary research project would probably be considered the province of specialists. In other words, scholars in digital writing may say this type of cross-disciplinary research is outside of their expertise, which is an argument echoed by L2 writing specialists. Though we do not advocate that researchers develop projects about issues in which they have little grounding, we do believe that researchers should view this disciplinary division as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. So while I read along, probably you can start to mark the kind of stance, because I have marked a few. Let's see. Okay. Starting though we do not. Okay, here. So, though we do not advocate that researchers develop projects about issues in which they have little grounding, okay, concede, though we do not. We do, okay, believe. So this is very strong. We do believe to pronounce, okay, to be assertive. That researchers should view this disciplinary division as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. As we have already is to emphasize, okay, when you want to decide which value can best describe the statement, I think one way is to kind of, you can just omit already and see the different effect that it achieves. Okay, for example, as we have begun to see, or as we have already begun to see, I feel like there's some difference, okay, in these two kind of saying. Okay, as we have begun to see it as plain factual statement, as we have already begun to see. Okay, so it's to emphasize by using already. So the writing classroom of the new millennium is characterized by digitally mediated class communication and is populated by students from around the world. Okay, so after a few factual statements, is characterized by, is populated by, face, become. We talk about this like by saying something factual, you are also implicitly authoritative, okay, about your statement. So, yet, to engage in these types of inquiry, teachers, scholars have little, again, very strong, have little theoretical and methodological precedent for studying issue of these disciplines. So the niche, okay, the gap is here. Yet to engage in these types of inquiry, okay, teacher and scholars, both of them have little theoretical and methodological grounding, okay, so this is the niche. So basically what the author did is to, by using pronouncing and countering devices to indicate the gap in the current research. And the gap is there's no theoretical and methodological precedent in doing this cross-disciplinary concern, okay, project endeavor. Okay, so my advisor in my doctoral study, we collaborated and wrote this paper together, and then we analyzed a few research papers, and then we got this tentative results. So we try to do, the purpose of the paper is try to render the linguistic resources explicit for the learners, so you can see what kind of resources you can put to use. So we have different subtitles here, categories here. So for example, in Move 1, there are a few discursive stances that we found in those papers that we investigated. For example, of the four texts, the first one, they entertain potential challenges. In the next text, they entertain other views. And the next one, they assert. And the fourth one, they define a phenomenon. Okay, and by achieving those kind of discursive stances, they use different engagement options. For example, the first one, they put to use expansive devices and attributes. Okay, so expansive devices, they use may, modality, probability, and citation. And in attributing, they use do I see? No, I don't have an example here. Okay, so in the next example, they use expansive, disclaim, and attribute, entertain. So entertain, they use expressions like many, another, to some extent. And in conditionals, they use if. So you can see a lot of resources that we try to render explicit to the learners. Feel free to refer to the paper or the slides, which you probably have. And in achieving the second move, establish a niche, they all have different discursive stance. For example, to suggest that previously conducted research is limited, or to counter research. Let's take a look at the counter one. So they use expansive devices. They also use contractive devices. For example, little, yet, though, okay, or emphatic, do, it is obvious. But again, you need to go back to the context and see how those devices, linguistic expressions, collaborate together to achieve the kind of stance, effective stance. So quick conclusion, brief conclusion. So remember, when we talk about authorial stance, we try to negotiate a dialogic relationship with the readers. Okay, if we are assertive, we allow less room for the readers to counter-argue. If we are too tentative, there's probably much space for the readers to argue with you. And it also involves the collaboration of different levels of the linguistic expressions. At macro level, for example, identify lexical, grammatical signals such as when, but, precis. So these belong to the macro level, and you also need the macro level. Okay, for example, how those expressions collaborate and are built up from clause to clause and paragraph to paragraph to achieve certain rhetorical moves. Okay. And we also want to pay attention to the prosodic effect. The context always important, how they collaborate. Okay, that means that we need to pay attention to how meaning accumulates and radiates across extended discourse and reinforces the presentation of particular values or stance. And when we talk about appraisal in our own writing, it actually involves how you present your attitude, your voice, your stance, and the graduation. Okay, how you tune up or tune down certain kind of voice or stance. So all three components are equally important. And an update on my current research. So I am now focusing on coherence and readable argument in research paper argument. I hope next time I can come back and talk about my new research, and the reference to the two tables that you just saw. Okay, is from this paper. Okay, I think that's the end of my talk. Thank you.